Egypt has a big problem on its hands, and that problem is also our problem. We're about to make some connections that will change your perspective on the Middle East. Okay, folks, this one is a doozy. This one is unbelievable. And of course, you know this. I spend a lot of time talking about Egypt because my mom and my dad were both born and raised there. And so I spend a lot of time paying attention to the geopolitics of the region because I do think they have a significant effect on everything going on around the world. And I keep saying this on a regular basis. I think prominently the most significant reason why things in the Middle East have such a substantial effect on the rest of the world is because it is the center of Bible prophecy. And I think everything happens north, south, east, and west from Israel based on what the Bible tells us. And so when we are looking at these areas, when we start looking at stories from these countries, my goodness, they have a substantial effect on the rest of the world. And this story really outlines this. Now, what I thought I would do is I thought I would just read a lot of this story to you, and in reading it, stop and provide some commentary because it is absolutely major. Now, the title of the article is Egypt's Looming Crisis. And what it says is foreign policy dilemmas in Gaza and Ethiopia combined with an acute financial crisis could mean instability for the Arab world's most populous nation, which of course is very true, but keep this in mind. Instability for Egypt, because Egypt is a population of close to 115 million, means instability for the rest of the region, especially because it is now an ally of Israel and has been since 1978 or 1979 or so, and all of this makes a difference. So let me read this to you. It says, stability in the Middle East is vital to American interests. Now, the region remains a crucial source of energy and is located at the crossroads of world commerce. By the way, that is absolutely true because of what is related to the ins and the outs of our energy policy, which is heavily influenced by the activities of OPEC and all of the nations that are in the region. It staunchly affects the things that are happening in the Arabian Peninsula because of the tie with the Red Sea and the Suez Canal. And it also has a major effect because of the Sinai's connection to the north into Israel and, of course, into the obvious, the Mediterranean and everything else. And this article does a pretty good job of talking about all of it. It says, it also acts as an incubator for terrorist movements that have been able to reach well into the West and the United States. And in this arena, Egypt, home to a population, they say 109 million. I think it's closer to 115. Population of 109 million is a linchpin for stability. The country's security relationship with Israel and the United States helps buffer serious radical Islamic threats within the region, just as it impeded Iranian expansionism within the Middle East. And by the way, this is absolutely true. We know that Iran has been substantially stopped. And I want you guys to think about this, right? When we look at the sizes of militaries in the Middle East, second in terms of size, we're not talking about power, we're just talking about size. Only second to Turkey, Iran is the biggest military. And then when you throw in all of the influences of their proxies, whether it be Hamas, probably 50,000 people, whether it be Hezbollah, another 150,000, whether it be the Houthis in the southern portion of the Arabian Peninsula, you are talking about a substantially sized fighting force that has been held back a lot, by the way, quite a bit by the efforts of Egypt and the United States, and because of the peace treaty that exists between Egypt and Israel and the effects it has on what happens with world trade. So we know that this is true. This is not an incorrect assertion regarding any of this. But let's go on to see what the article says, because this is really important stuff. It says this. It says, it is therefore important for U.S. foreign policy to recognize challenges to Egyptian stability. Most prominently, Egypt has been put in the global spotlight in the past few months because of the ongoing war in Gaza. As Israel prosecutes its campaign against Hamas, developments along the Sinai border near Rafah could be viewed as an infringement on Egyptian sovereignty with political consequences in Cairo, which, by the way, I'm just going to tell you this right now. Egypt is going to do everything that it can to keep its hands away from its northern border, specifically where it is in Gaza, because as Rafah is being now approached by Israel, having to deal with the after effects of what happened in Khan Yunis, still in the south of Gaza, Egypt wants nothing to do with that. As a matter of fact, Egypt is building significantly larger border walls around Gaza and making it much harder for people to go in that way, specifically with respect to the tunnels that have been known to be under that area, because Egypt wants nothing to do with the security problem that could arise with flushing a bunch of terrorists to Egypt's north, okay? The Sinai can't tolerate it. The region of the Sinai can't tolerate it. The region of Egypt that touches the Mediterranean into Gaza, which of course, out of Gaza into the Suez Canal. These all have substantial effects on a lot of different things. So this is really, really important. So look at this, and this is such a powerful picture that this author draws. He goes on to say, meanwhile, other conflict is brewing in the south as Egypt faces increased water scarcity due to the new Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. Tensions with Ethiopia are growing after negotiations reached a dead end in December, complicating, which by the way, I will do a video just on the Ethiopia problem alone, because the dam that they're talking about here changes a lot about how water is actually being transferred in the region and how it's being accessed, and specifically how it's being managed. So it changes a lot. And by the way, water is always going to be a major source of debate amongst any nation for a lot of different reasons, okay? So this is all very important stuff to be mindful of, and it's really, really critical if you want to better understand the region and know what's going on. Somalia has a lot to do with it, which by the way, I can tell you Ilhan Omar from here in the United States of America is trying to sabotage things with Egypt, not even realizing that she's doing it. And this is another really important issue, because when you get Somalia involved, it becomes really ugly, as he's about to explain, right? So he goes on to say this, complicating this conflict is Ethiopia's recent recognition of Somaliland, an autonomous region of Somalia unrecognized by the Somalian government. And by the way, this is a big problem, right? This is akin to the problem that we see with Morocco and that area of Sahara. It's akin to the same problem that you might see with Asia. It would be akin to what's happening with Taiwan or Hong Kong and China and many other things like this, right? There are debates as into where sovereignty exists, and perhaps most prominent of these types of debates would be what's going on with Putin with respect to Ukraine and, of course, Russia and the expansion of NATO. It's the same type of thing, and they are very, very powerful, serious issues. Now, the article goes on to say Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi hosted a press conference with the president of Somalia where he explicitly threatened to support Somalia's sovereignty with military assistance. By the way, he has to. He absolutely has to do that, because if he doesn't do that, then he puts at risk some of the resources that he is trying to protect when it comes to the Arabian Peninsula. Because remember this, if you are coming from the Indian Ocean, the Persian Gulf, or the Arabian Sea, you have to enter into the Gulf of Aden, which of course you pass through Djibouti, and in there you are touching Somalia at the tip. You are passing through Ethiopia, Eritrea, Sudan. There's a lot of countries involved here. And if Egypt says we're not going to stand by Somalia's position in this area, then it puts immediately at risk all the operations that it has to guard in the Gulf of Aden, in the Red Sea, and of course in that little pass where Djibouti is. They have to protect all of that. So it's very, very important, because think about it like this. If no trade comes into the Red Sea, if no ships come into the Red Sea, the Suez Canal is not being used. If the Suez Canal is not being used, then trade that is highly dependent upon movement in the Mediterranean is completely lost, and you have some serious instability, which, by the way, this will radically affect Israel. So this is why he has to get involved, right? And now, this is interesting, because look what this person says. It says that this conflict spilled over into the U.S. Congress after Representative Ilhan Omar appeared to pledge support to the Somalian government's claim. And by the way, anytime Ilhan Omar speaks about anything, you know that she's ignorant as could be. I guarantee you Ilhan would not be able to even identify half the countries on the map that she's interfering with or substantially trying to affect. I'm sorry, but that's just the reality. So it goes on to say this: in addition to these potential international conflicts in Gaza and with Ethiopia, a more insidious threat to Egyptian stability is approaching on the economic front. As we've been talking about, the Houthi attacks on international maritime trade passing through the Bab al-Mandab Strait have had a massive impact on global supply chains. There has been a 30% decline in global container ship volume passing through the Suez, according to the IMF. And major shipping companies like Maersk have suspended their routes through the canal indefinitely. Let me just simply say this. The reason why this has such a powerful impact is because of what the Houthis are doing with respect to what's happening with the ships that are coming in to the Red Sea. The last sentence of this paragraph says, though the Houthi impact on global trade is pronounced, the pain is all the more acute for Egypt's canal revenues. Why? Because a lot of money that Egypt used to make on tourism has been redirected towards the function of the Suez Canal, which has been able to make up for a lot of the problems that they've been having going into this region and going into this area. This is super important to be mindful of, right? This is super critical. We got to understand this, right? So look what he goes on to say. He says Egypt's external debt stands at around 164.5 billion, way better than the United States. The country's trade deficit means Egypt is starved of dollars, such as the government can no longer maintain a peg of the Egyptian pound of 31 EGP per dollar. The official government, which, by the way, that's the official government exchange rate for those of you that don't know, okay? What it goes on to say is the parallel market now values $1 at roughly 60 EGP, right? We're talking about, really, in essence, we call them Egyptian pounds. That's what we say, basically. A level Egyptians once found unimaginable. The diversification of traffic from the Suez to other maritime route compromises one of Egypt's largest sources of dollarized income, and the disruption of the Suez Canal's revenue stream is significant and compromises approximately 40% of the canal's revenues. And it goes on to say this, and I'll read this, and then we'll leave it at that because there's some commentary I want to throw into this. It says this. It says, however, Egypt's current economic crisis, though significant, bellies a broader financial crisis looming for the country. Massive amounts of public borrowing over the last decade for state-funded projects have been primarily financed by the central bank printing currency, with the majority of loans underwritten in Egypt used to fund mega projects like the new administrative capital and ambitious new monorail. By the way, those projects were initiated as a result of Hillary Clinton's State Department interfering in Shawara Tahrir when they threw over the old Egyptian government to create the kind of problem that we have. So we, the United States of America, forced Egypt to enter into this level of debt in order to fix a problem that they had created. And don't think for 1 second Al-Sisi doesn't see this, right? The president knows this. He understands this. Though lauded as ventures that would boost foreign direct investment in the country, these infrastructural initiatives failed to draw significant appetite from the international community. Instead of being scrapped, the government simply decided to fund the projects on its own. It has to. It's forced to be able to fund these projects because, look, the thought was when you do these infrastructural changes and you add and you build, then it will encourage tourism, and by encouraging tourism, then the kind of money necessary to be able to create a sustainable GDP to fix the problem with Egypt and their economy in the current moment would actually be rectified. The problem is the way the economy in Egypt was destroyed is not akin to the way they're trying to fix it. The way the economy in Egypt was destroyed was by the State Department's interference in causing what happened to happen in Shawara Tahrir and damaging all of the tourism that we begin to see specifically in the Sinai and specifically because of the problems that we're seeing right now in Gaza. All of those things were created by the interference of the United States of America. The United States of America and their policies, specifically Joe Biden's policies, created the conditions that we're seeing right now, not only in Gaza, but created the conditions that we're seeing in Jordan, the conditions we're seeing in Syria, the conditions that we're seeing in Iran, especially in Iran, and the conditions that we're seeing all over the Middle East. Now, why is that such a big problem? As we have taken the time to create for you the picture of how bad things are getting in Egypt, you need to understand something. If Egypt destabilizes for even one moment, and that moment extends so long as it breaks another portion of the sustainable chain, it will begin to put into a tailspin the rest of the Middle East. What could end up happening at that point is that Europe's interference in the region could actually come to an all-time high because it has to rectify some problems that they see beginning to manifest in that region. And if the United States of America gets involved while all of that's happening, and China recognizes Americans' involvement in that and decides to say they're so distracted that we're going to do our thing and attacks Taiwan, then we have on our hands a problem far greater than anybody can see. Folks, by legal definition, we are already in a world war. Can I just say that again? By legal definition, we are already in a world war. Okay? The problem is it will come to a point where people will begin to panic. And that panicking will create a series of problems. By the way, can I just say this? What we're seeing right now with the crisis in the Mediterranean will undoubtedly spark Turkey off to a degree. It will allow Greece to function in a way that it has never functioned before, at least militaristically speaking, with respect to a defensive position, especially how it relates to Cyprus, believe it or not, south of Turkey, okay? And what it ends up doing is it gives Beirut some breathing room because of the dynamic that's taking place in that little tiny area where Turkey and Syria meet, where the Mediterranean is, where, of course, we know Turkey's doing all kinds of offshore drilling completely without any success. Erdogan's going crazy with that. And if all of that happens and things begin to move in that direction, the only way that you're going to see any type of acceptable security solution will be if Egypt continues to stabilize. But if it destabilizes for any reason, now we're left with the other larger country that is bordering the Mediterranean, and that's going to be Libya. And guess what? Libya is half occupied by Russia right now. And if Russia wins the civil war, which they will in Libya, then they control all of the southern Mediterranean, or almost all of the southern Mediterranean, at least 60% of the southern Mediterranean. Tunisia's not going to get involved with Russia's involvement. Certainly, as you know, to be able to have control over all of these areas is going to be a huge advantage for Russia, especially because Russia already has bases in Sudan. We know that they have some involvement in a certain portion of Somalia. We know that for several reasons. Number one relates to a problem that happened in Kenya and Mogadishu, which is a whole other thing to talk about. So look, let me just simply say this. The further we get into this mess, the larger of a door we have opening to the kind of destabilization in the Middle East that we know may very well change alliances. And those alliances that will change will be Ezekiel 38 type alliances, okay? I can tell you that right now. The other alliances that will change will be the type of alliances necessary that create the final Antichrist power and rule. Folks, it's all happening. We're watching it all begin to destabilize. And I'm telling you right now, we need to keep a very close eye on this. By the way, the United States of America has already put itself in a terrible position as it relates to these things. Make no mistake about it. But we've got to wake up to recognize and understand what's really happening, folks. The world is changing quickly. And my exhortation to you would be, stay close to your Bibles. Study the Word and keep an eye on the news, because the Bible is going to be the perfect filter for you to understand all what's going on, because things are changing quick. By the way, more on the Egypt problem to come. We're going to do a lot of work on this. As a matter of fact, we may do a whole lot of work on this later this week because of the problems that we're seeing beginning to surface right now in the immediate moment. All right? God bless you guys. Stay close to the Word. We love you.